Hello, my name is Timothy Ribbon. In this video, I'm showing you how to take a scroll saw pattern and make a letter. So I ended up doing one of these for my son's bedroom. Actually, he did the cutting, I did the little plaque behind. But that's what's happening in this tutorial. If you missed the making a letter tutorial, how do you make your own scroll saw pattern, check below in the description. I've got a link to that video. It teaches you how to do this. It's a super easy process. So I've got a piece of wood. It was a 1x6 at one point. I ended up resawing a piece. I took a 1x6, cut it in half, and then planed it. Now, if you don't have access to those tools, but you're thinking about making your shop a little bit nicer, I've got suggestions down below for that too, and those are the tools that I like. You might want to check that out. So here's what you need to do next. So you're gonna need to pick one of these guys. I'm gonna go with this because I think he's got a nice flat spot on the bottom. I think it'll stand up or just look nice in general. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this pattern out. Now what you're gonna notice is I'm leaving white paper beyond my cut line. You need to do those same kind of things. Do not cut with the scissors directly where your scroll saw is gonna cut. You're gonna end up having a bad experience. Your pattern's gonna rip right off. I am gonna try to take some excess off so that I don't have so much paper to contend with on my actual scroll saw pattern. Here's my piece of wood. Now you look, I've got a knot, but I'm not gonna stress about that. I'm gonna just try to cut around that thing. I do want my grain to go vertically. I think that's best. It's not a must-have. I just kind of like it. I actually changed my mind to avoid the knot. I'm gonna just place this in here. Now, I noticed that, or you would notice, I hope at least, that I've got a perfectly straight cut that would need to be made there. So the letter that I've chosen actually lends itself well to taking advantage of the edge of the piece of wood. So I'm gonna take the top of my T off, at least pattern-wise, so I can do some lining up. And when I glue, I'm gonna end up gluing all the way up to the top there. So this is what's going on, all the way up to that edge. That way I don't have to cut on that line. It's gonna save me a little time. So if you've watched many of my videos, you probably already know my preference is to use rubber cement. It's not because it's necessarily the best product for this. It's because I've been doing it since I was a little kid. This is the way that my grandpa taught me to do it. And you know what they say, old habits, they die hard. If you haven't heard that one, it's they die hard. So I could actually break this habit relatively easily, but I just kind of like to do things the way that my grandpa taught me. It's just one of the ways that I can honor him, I feel like. So I'm flipping this around. I think my T is gonna end up around this knot. I don't believe it's gonna be affected by anything. I'm gonna keep it kind of over this way just to be sure. I'm feeling around to make sure that this pattern lines up the way I want it to. I like to smooth it out, and I wait a minimum of 2 minutes. If you've been rushing things on your patterns and they're pulling up, you gotta learn to be a little more patient. Right, so it's time to talk some technique. Now here's an issue that you might encounter if you've never done this before. The piece of wood that we're cutting through is really thin, and that means that you're most likely gonna have to adjust your speed. Now, in previous videos, I've always told you crank up that speed. That's because we're going through a much thicker piece of wood. In this one, my advice is to crank it way down, and now it's time to start to get a feel for what the saw is capable of. You might want it a little bit higher, but this is gonna take some experimenting. Get ready to learn. Right, it's technique time. Every shape's gonna be a little bit different, but here's how I'd cut this piece out. Right, so you might have noticed I just did a straight cut in and backed right out. Now you can do that, but the thing that you need to know is you always have to keep the saw running. Pay attention to that detail as you see me continue to cut. Now another thing you're not seeing me do on camera, but while I'm cutting, if I'm hitting a curve or something like that, sometimes I'm doing adjustments to this speed dial as I cut. Now, you might not be able to do that. I'm just saying that's a technique thing. You could try those things out. Alright, so that's it for the cutting piece of things. Now it's not done. I do have to do a little bit of sanding, especially on the back side. I'm going to show you that in a moment after I rip my pattern off. Front side looks pretty darn good. Back side's going to have a little bit of chip out. I could have used a different blade. I could have gone with more TPI, teeth per inch, but I didn't. So I'm going to sand this up and check out this next video. I'm going to show you how you wrap this project up and do some things to it that I think are pretty cool to make it a good keepsake.